Jared Karol here, DIB speaker, leadership development coach, strategic communications, facilitator of difficult conversations. I've been doing this work in some capacity for about 20 years, really. As a teacher, I taught a social justice curriculum, learned all about power and privilege and social capital and how people do or do not use their power for good. And more recently, the last 5 years or so, I've been doing a lot of speaking, facilitating conversations, really really kind of narrowing in on this idea of whiteness and white supremacy and white privilege, and me being a white person, really leveraging that ability to connect with other white people and maybe give them some insights and perspectives that they perhaps haven't thought of themselves, or have people in their circles, social or professional circles, who they could talk about. And so really trying to elevate that consciousness on an individual level, team level, leadership level, company level, society level. For, I'd say, about 25 years of my life, I was silent. I had very few friends or colleagues or relationships with people of color. So I lived a very privileged life. I was a college athlete. I played lacrosse, which I think is about 120% white. And so, I went through this 25 years of life with kind of not really having a clue about the lived experiences of other people, especially people who weren't white. So then around that time, through a series of experiences and just kind of a general maturity and evolution of consciousness, started to say, like, wow, there are a lot of people, a lot of communities, a lot of experiences that I'm just not familiar with. And I started to feel like I was missing out. Like I was missing out on the vast dynamism of the human condition, of like humanity, right? And that I was siloing myself and kind of making decisions around who I was going to hang out with, who I didn't want to hang out with, what types of communities and events I would go to. And it was about 20 years ago, in 2000, when I moved up to San Francisco, and I said, I don't want to be that guy anymore. I don't want to be that guy that, that passes an executive order that says, we can't talk about race and privilege because it's divisive, right? And so I really just dove in and decided that if I can educate myself and enter into this work with curiosity and empathy and vulnerability, then I can contribute in a much more holistic and kind of expansive and inclusive way. So that's a kind of a general overview of how I've gotten into this work, especially from that perspective of silence and complicity. For people who aren't like well versed in whatever child development or education kind of principles and philosophies, and especially progressive education, it might seem like, well, how can you teach 5-year-olds and 11-year-olds and 8-year-olds about this stuff? Like, there's such complex, difficult topics. And that's true. And one thing that I learned early on in my teaching career was there's a difference between truth and facts, right? So, for example, the truth is, and a 5-year-old can understand this, and a 105-year-old can understand that there is systemic racism, right? Now, the facts, you might not tell a 5-year-old and show him, pictures of Emmett Till's open casket in 1955 when he's all, right? Because that's, scare the crap out of him, right? And so, but you can talk about these things in an age-appropriate way so that you're not sweeping things under the rug, you're not denying, you're not avoiding. And so it takes from the adult, whether the teacher, the parent, the administrator, whoever's kind of working with the kids, to really give kids more credit than most of the reason we don't talk to kids about this stuff is not because of them, it's because of us. Like, we don't feel comfortable. We don't feel competent. We don't know as much as we would like to know to really be able to talk about it in a fluid, comfortable way. So we have to get over our hangups and go, hey, these kids need to have these perspectives because they're listening, right? They're watching, especially their direct family, right? I mean, we live with them every day, so they're seeing what we do and don't do, what we say, we don't say, who we hang out with, all these things, right? They're picking that up. So, I guess my advice or my insight is, give kids credit for what they can understand, and they will ask questions if they don't understand it. I've done work with so many different people individually, teams, companies, nonprofit, so many different in education, obviously, and obviously not just with white people. But what I found more and more over the years through my own development, own kind of evolution of consciousness, is that a lot of the way I was writing or talking or kind of emphasizing was helping other white people kind of get with the program. Because as a white person doing this work, there aren't that many of us, and a lot of people don't enter into it because they don't feel comfortable. They don't feel like it's their place. And that's a whole arena to go into, which we won't go into now. But when I said, well, how can I make really the most impact? And I found that, especially this year, the last 3, 4, 5, 6 months, with anyone who's been paying attention knows that racial injustice didn't start with the murder of George Floyd, right? So, but white people especially, who have been made to realize through just events, and I think COVID is playing a lot into this, where we're all kind of at home and we're vulnerable and we're trying to figure stuff out with kids and work and job losses, etc. And we see all this going on, and I think a lot of white people are going like, oh my gosh, like, this is horrible. How have I not known this? So there's this genuine interest and curiosity. So like this idea that, hey, I know I should be doing more and knowing more, and I want to, but I don't really know what to do, what to think, what to say, how to go about it. So that's kind of the environment, the atmosphere that's kind of brought me to specifically that type of workshop where, hey, white people, I'm a white person, we can have these conversations, we're going to get real, and I'm not going to give you the answers. I don't have the answers. I'm not going to come in as an expert. There are certain things I cannot talk about because I don't have the lived experience of a black person or another person of color. But what I can do is help give you some confidence, give you some reality check, provide you with some perspectives that perhaps you hadn't thought of before. And one thing that I make clear whenever I work with anyone is, if you're coming to me as the solution or the workshop or the your budget has X $1,000 and you're going to spend it all on me, then that's not the answer. So yes, use me. We'll talk about exactly what I can and can't do, will and will not do, and that should be part of a much larger effort on your team's part, on your company's part, on your part as an individual, because that's really important to me. That it's not like I don't have all the answers, but I have, I think, a little piece of the puzzle that is important and can be really useful and impactful. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure letting me share a few ideas, a few thoughts, a few perspectives. Really appreciate FitPros for the opportunity. A couple things I want to leave people with when you're doing this work. A couple things to center, and they're kind of self or personal development principles. Curiosity. Always lead with curiosity, beginner's mindset. Empathy, not as a reaction or a response, but as a default mindset, right? Respect people's experiences as their truth. You can do that, you've got half of D&I in the bag. Vulnerability. You got to share your stories. You got to sit with uncertainty. You got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And the last thing is courage. This idea, not courage like macho, like, that courage, but if you're uncertain, if you're unsure, if you're uncomfortable, if you don't know, do it afraid. Keep asking those questions. Keep entering into those conversations. Because it's so easy, especially for white people, to say, oh, it's too hard, and you peace out. And then we're left with the status quo. So that's my pep talk for anyone who's listening. You're welcome to find me at my website, jaredkarol.com, JaredKarol.com. And also on LinkedIn is probably the best place. I do have accounts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, but I'm very inactive, mostly for mental health. I don't need to manage all that stuff. So find me on LinkedIn, connect with me. Happy to have a conversation. I'm very active there. So thanks a lot, FitPros, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.